Thanks to everyone for joining Virtual Vino tonight. I'm Alan Emery, sitting in for Devin. This evening, we will be tasting and discussing one of my favorite wineries, Keuka Lake Vineyards from the Finger Lakes region of New York. Our guests will be Mel Goldman, a longtime friend and owner of KLV, and his winemaker, Ben Sherman. KLV has consistently produced some of the highest rated wines from the Finger Lakes. Last year, the KLV Cabernet Franc was one of only 2 red wines recommended by the New York Times for Thanksgiving. KLV wines have also received accolades from Dave McIntyre at the Washington Post and Wine Spectator magazine, as well as others. Today, we will be tasting the previously mentioned Cabernet Franc, along with the semi-dry Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and Vignoles. Besides the fact that I'm a huge fan of KLV wines, I wanted to taste these wines this evening because they are ideal for Thanksgiving. Not only will they pair perfectly with your meal, but they're American wines made somewhat locally. Finger Lakes isn't that far away. In fact, Mel Goldman lived in Maryland for several years before moving to the Finger Lakes and starting his winery. For those of you who have not visited the Finger Lakes, it's a beautiful region with long, thin lakes surrounded by vineyards. So it's really cool. If you have the wines and have not already done so, go ahead and pour a taste of the Gewürztraminer. I've already done so, naturally. Mel and Ben are going to join us just in a moment. And please do not hesitate to ask questions of them in the comments section. Also, don't hesitate to like and send friendly emojis our way. Here they come. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I've got a lot of questions, and both of you likely will be too busy answering other questions and telling us so much that I won't get through most of my questions, but let's just get started quickly. Mel, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and the history of KLV, and then go ahead and introduce Ben and explain to us why you chose Ben as to be your winemaker.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Alan and I have known each other for a number of years, and I've loved working with him. And as he said, I lived for many years in the suburbs of DC and the northern suburbs in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I was working in DC and in an international institution. In fact, I started my work internationally in the Peace Corps and worked in Nepal, and then worked in Colombia and South America, and then in India. Another developing country I had the privilege of working in was the United Kingdom. But in all of those countries, I worked with farmers. In the case of Nepal, when I was teaching math and science in village schools, all of my students were farmer kids. I had always wanted to get involved in farming, and the grape idea came from a series of experiences. My first one was on a small kibbutz in Israel when I was in college, and I had to work in the summers. And instead of waiting on tables, one summer my mother was happy to finance me to do something that, and so I worked for 2 months in 4 in the morning till noon on a grape farm, and for 2 months, and it was hard work and it was lovely, and I just grew enamored with grapes. Later on, grew enamored with different kinds of farming, but grapes always held me. And when visiting Napa and Burgundy, I came to the conclusion we needed to grow grapes. It was only after a while. My wife is from Oregon, but Oregon was too far from the DC area. And we looked at Virginia, but I must confess that I didn't quite enjoy the wines in Virginia as much as in the Finger Lakes, and found we were going college visitings with kids, and just discovered this area, and discovered how good the wines could be, and discovered the great Riesling. So we began by trying to farm from afar, living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and coming up on weekends to spray and take care of the grapes was you learned very quickly that was a foolish maneuver. So we ended up, I took very, 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 very early retirement, and we came up here and started planting Riesling and Pinot Noir, and eventually we planted Vignoles and Cabernet Franc, and another grape, Léon Millot, that I'll mention later as well. And it was a labor of love, and only by accident not by accident, we knew that our grapes were highly desired because all the local wineries wanted to buy our Riesling. And so we decided to make a pilot effort of grapes, non-commercial, from our own Riesling. And it was so good that in an informal tasting in Paris, it beat out a couple of Grand Crus from Alsace. So we decided we got to go commercial. And that was in 2004. And so in 2005, we made our first vintage of wine, and eventually have built everything very, very gradually. We don't have a big daddy to finance a huge undertaking, so we've built this in a very gradual way. For many years, we had a wonderful, wonderful winemaker whose name was Stacy Nugent. She was exceedingly capable, an outstanding winemaker. Off and on here for about 12 years. Well, for various family, etc. reasons, she would leave and then come back. This time, she was unfortunately being a parent and being a full-time winemaker was very difficult. And lo and behold, I was very fortunate to meet via WhatsApp, meet Ben, and we had hours and hours of conversation while he was finishing up a vintage as making wine in New Zealand. Ben will tell you more about his exceedingly interesting background, but it was very clear that he would be a good, the right person to come on and take this on and take more responsibility. So, Ben, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mel. And thank you, Alan, for having us tonight. So just a little bit of history about how I came to become Mel's winemaker. It's a bit of a convoluted path to arrive here, but I think the journey was a lot of fun, to say the least. And, the path started back in my bachelor's degree. I never sought out to be a winemaker initially. My studies at University of Pittsburgh were neuroscience and chemistry, and I was actually kind of set for a career path in medicine. I didn't really have any other alternative ideas for my life at that point. And so, as you can imagine, towards the end of my bachelor's degree, I was preparing for med school and studying, really long days and preparing for my MCAT and volunteering in hospitals and trying to meet as many doctors as I could to, gain some experience about the reality of becoming a doctor. And this was all happening at the same time while I was working in restaurants and working in a neurobiology lab for the University of Pittsburgh. And so as the months went by and I began to educate myself on the kind of the reality of the state of the healthcare systems and what it would really like to be a doctor, and realized that, after all was said and done, that I was pretty disinterested in dedicating the next 7 years of my life to med school and to this path. And I think that was kind of a pivotal position in my life that would ultimately kind of set me in this path for winemaking. I can remember the sense of feeling and freedom that I had after having 7 years of my life open up. And I remember asking myself, what am I going to do now? And it was quite an invigorating feeling. I had, a lot of pent up energy that was newly released, and I had the desire to explore and to see the unknown and experience different cultures and learn about who I was and what my limitations and fears were. And I came to, a realization that I wanted to go on an adventure, an adventurer's venture. And, I became inspired by a man named Helgi Peterson, who embarked on a round the world motorcycle adventure that lasted about 10 years. And he clocked about 250,000 miles on his motorcycle. And he'd written a bunch of books, and he was an incredible photographer. And I was like just absolutely fascinated by this man's life and what he had experienced. So as I was working on experiments in a neurobiology lab, I was daydreaming and realizing my own motorcycle adventure, you see. And this is where the exception for a big ride came to fruition. And I decided I wanted to ride to the southernmost city in the world, Ushuaia in Argentina. And, I took off on this adventure in 2013. And I drove across the country and down into Mexico, into Panama, and chartered a boat from Panama to Colombia, and made my way down into Argentina, where I got my first taste of some wineries. And I think that's where, a bit of the inception to become a winemaker took hold in my brain. And I really got a sense of what it was like to make wine and to see these beautiful buildings and these beautiful barrel halls and just the absolute gorgeous scenery that were surrounding these wineries. And I was really inspired by that. So when I came back home to Pittsburgh, I still wasn't set on the idea of becoming a winemaker. I was kind of still in love and romanticized the idea of traveling by motorcycle. So I wanted to start a venture motorcycle company. And after having kind of gone through some reverse culture shock and kind of settled back into life in the United States, my old boss, who I had worked for in the restaurant business during college, had contacted me about becoming a sommelier apprentice. And I thought this would be something fun to do in the interim while I was dreaming and scheming about this venture motorcycle company. And, it really took hold in my life, and I got really obsessive and really passionate about wine, and got involved with a lot of the sommeliers in the city, and went through the quartermaster sommeliers and got my level 2 certification, and also some certifications through WSET, and worked for a number of years in the restaurant business, worked my way up into sommelier position, and then finally as a wine director for this restaurant group. And I really enjoyed it. I found that it was it was an education for me. I got to really taste and learn about all the wine regions from all over the world. And by consequence, I got to meet also a lot of winemakers, and I began to realize that that's where I wanted to go, and that's where I was moving towards. And finally, I made the decision to go back to school, and I had contacted a school in Bordeaux, Bordeaux Sciences Agro, which is agricultural school in Bordeaux. And I got accepted and went out there and began a master's program in viticulture and enology, and spent a couple years working in France, and really got to learn what it meant to be a winemaker in France and working with all those beautiful grape varietals. And it was an incredible experience. And, I continued working in some other regions around the world. I traveled back home to the United States and did some small consulting projects, and then went to California and worked out there in Napa for a little bit. And most recently was in New Zealand, as Mel said, and was working in Marlborough for a winery called Antsfield Estate. And that was a really influential experience for me, and worked with a lot of great winemakers. And that's where Mel and I connected through WhatsApp, and spent many hours, like you said, online talking. And we've really felt this was a great opportunity for both of us to work together. And fast forward till now, here we are finishing up the season, and it's been great. So that's kind of the short end of the long story.
So that's really cool and very interesting. The question I have for you, since we're all tasting the Gewürztraminer right now, is can you tell us a little bit about the varietal and also why you think it grows so well in the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, absolutely. So Gewürztraminer, one of the 4 noble grape varietals, French grape varietal. This is a great example. I would say it's a very quintessential Gewürztraminer. So this is an aromatic white grape varietal. So there's a lot of floral components, a lot of tropical components as well. When you when you smell this wine, you should get some of those like rose petal aromas, some lychee characteristics, a little bit of pineapple. But on this wine, it's a little bit more of an unripe pineapple, and I think that's kind of due to the cooler climate. So Gewürztraminer can kind of have a range of flavor profiles, but being this cooler region, you develop a little bit more of the less tropical characteristics and more of a citrus driven quality to this wine.
Mel, if you could tell us, anything you want to add to that, and also since I mentioned earlier that I thought all 4 of these wines would be ideal for Thanksgiving dinner, any specific Thanksgiving items you think it would go ideally with?
I can particularly answer the first part. I mean, the Gewürztraminer, I share what Ben said about the Gewürztraminer being a perfect aromatic grape for this area, and in fact, planted some back about more than 10 years ago, and it's so difficult to grow, and so finally we decided we took out the Gewürztraminer that we planted and put in Riesling, and then made a relationship with what I think is one of the best growers in the Finger Lakes, Sunrise Hill, a wonderful couple, Bob and Kathy Ruiz, and they really do a magnificent job of growing it. Gewürztraminer grows so well with a variety of food. In the case of, I think the combination of having, kind of a cranberry sauce with turkey, it would just be perfect with Gewürztraminer.
Agreed.
That combination. Gewürztraminer would also go, if you're a curried turkey eater, it would even go better.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah,
I mean, I've always thought Asian food and Gewürztraminer were ideal pairings.
Right. Yes, that's what I would. I love to have this with a curry.
I see Gary, one of my neighbors, Gary, has commented, and I really appreciate. I live in this wonderful neighborhood in Lake Linganore, and I know Gary's watching, and Stacy as well. So thanks y'all so much for watching, and some family members as well. So we tasted the Gewürztraminer. Let's move on to the Vignole. And Ben,
I was just going to add something. Sorry,
go ahead,
I meant to. I think that Ben said it in a slightly different way. The thing I love about this Gewürztraminer is that in a cool climate like ours, it's very difficult to get that exactly exactly the same flavors that you might get in Alsace with a Gewürztraminer. But here, I think what Stacy made this wine, and what she did was, it's just a beautiful, subtle flavor, I think. And yes, it might, some of those flavors might be not over, not harsh on you. It would be subtle. They're there. That pineapple is there, but not so overtly. That's what I would say, and that's one of the reasons I like this Gewürztraminer, because it's not so overt in terms of those floral characteristics and its and the fruitiness and the spice. But it does have a
description. Mm-hmm. And folks, if you're watching and tasting the wines, please don't hesitate to tell us any of the flavors you're getting. Just throw it up in our comments section. We're always curious of what other people think. So the next wine we're going to taste is the Vignoles. And again, it's an unusual grape for most people. So I'm sure everyone's curious to hear from you, Ben, to tell us a little bit about Vignoles.
Yeah, so my first time working with Vignole, and Mel can go into a little bit about the history of Vignole and its origins, but I've kind of been smitten with this grape varietal since working with it this year and getting the chance to taste a lot of different vintages. And this 2016, it has such a beautiful, like, golden rich color, and it's quite viscous in the glass. And it's another extremely complex and aromatic grape varietal. There's so much to explore in the glass when it comes to Vignole. And I find that one of the defining characteristics is like the sweet lemon meringue pie quality. There's a lot of citrus notes as well, some mandarins and some quite floral aspects to the wine. Potentially maybe you can find some orange blossoms or some honeysuckle as well. And as they begin to age, they take on some secondary characteristics, some nutty characteristics that I think are also quite delicious and interesting. So yeah, Vignoles is a fantastic grape varietal, has amazing aging characteristics, and I'm definitely interested and in love with this new grape varietal that I've been working with this year. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Mel, if there's anything you want to add, and the other thing I wanted to ask you, Mel, I know we've got some maps of the Finger Lakes region, and maybe Jess can put them up, and you can tell us a little bit about the area.
Okay, I think it might be, but first let me just speak briefly about Vignoles, and then we'll go into the fields and the area. The Vignoles, I think Ben hinted at this. One of the beauties of Vignoles is its ability to age. It's spectacular. I mean, we've been tasting wines from back in the noughts of Vignoles because we didn't make any wine before 05, and our 07, there was an 07 reserve Vignoles that we made that the Wine Advocate rated 93, by the way. And I didn't even know many years ago that the wine writers would write about Vignoles. But these Vignoles just age beautifully. They evolve, and that acid mellows a bit. It's a very acidic wine. It goes beautifully with seafood. It goes beautifully with a sausage, and it would go well with turkey. It wouldn't be my first choice for turkey of the 4 wines here. I would say the other 3 I would choose ahead of it. But I think that this Vignole, and one of the things we planted about a little over 5 acres of Vignole, and we grow it specially. It is also subject to rot in the fall, and so we grow it very much like vinifera and try to air it out so that we avoid those problems, and we ripen it extensively so that we bring down the acids and the flavors just penetrate, those ripe flavors just penetrate it well. And I think we've been very successful, even with before the Vignoles now are all our own grapes, but previously we would have some of our grapes, and some of the grapes would come from other vineyards. So about our vineyards. So since we're getting into the, you were going to show, I think we ought to talk a little bit about the Finger Lakes itself. The Finger Lakes is a fabulous region. It's about a little over 5 hours due north on Route 15 from the DC area. Baltimore, you have from the Baltimore or from Western Maryland, you'd have to go a slightly different route, but you'd end up in the same place. It's about 4.5 hours, I think, from Baltimore, and maybe 5 hours and a quarter from DC. And from New York, it's not much less. It's 4 hours and a half, 4 hours and 45 minutes. And you can see that the Finger Lakes benefit. They're very close to one of the biggest and deepest Great Lakes, which is Ontario, due north. Our lake, see, there are 5 major lakes. We're the 3rd largest. The 1st largest is Seneca Lake, right there. The second largest is Cayuga Lake, and we're the 3rd largest in volume of water and size. And then there are a bunch of other lakes. There, you can see going all the way between, essentially below Syracuse and below Rochester, New York. We are, if you see that arrow on Keuka Lake, those of you watching, it's to the, that's where our eastern vineyard, that's where most of our vineyard is. If you go directly across the lake, you'll find our smaller vineyard and our tasting room and winery facility. So that, which is on the west side of Keuka Lake. As you can see, all around Keuka Lake, there are 20 some odd wineries. The rest of it is largely forest or a couple of dairy farms. It's not very commercial. It's beautiful. And if you come here in the, as Alan did in the summer, okay, there's our East Side Vineyard, and you can see there's one variety of wine that's not in the four pack this time that Alan and company carry, and that you can get in many of the wine stores, is the Upper East Side. If you look all the way, and that Upper East Side is a fantastic wine. We're not tasting it tonight, but it's a delicious wine, evaluated by McIntyre and the Washington Post, and the Wine Spectator gave it a 91. It's a delicious wine. And we were making fun of New York City with our name Upper East Side. You know, tra-la-la, Upper East Side's supposed to be the rich area. But it was a name we chose because it represented our highest Riesling vineyard on the east side of the lake. So we called it the Upper East Side. Riesling, a dry Riesling. But as you can see, all of our Vignoles, I don't know if you can see it very well because but all of our Vignoles is on that. There's a Vignole. The Turkey Run is right next to the Upper East Side, and then the Vignole is in various places on the east side of the lake. So is our Cabernet Franc, which we'll get to later. There's a big Cabernet Franc section just to the north of a pond, and right in the kind of just to the east, and it's a little bit to halfway to the eastern side of the vineyard, and then the other Cabernet Franc is way down the hill, and that's the one that is a component of the Cabernet Franc that you're going to taste in a few minutes. I don't think we're there yet. We're going to the Riesling. Probably. Yeah,
but before we get to the Riesling, someone had a question. Austin had a question about why the Vignole ages so well, and does it have to do with the acidity? If either of you want to take that one on.
Yeah, I can take that on. So definitely the acidity is going to be a factor there. It's going to contribute to the freshness of the wine. So as the wine ages, it's going to maintain a level of freshness, and that freshness is going to be directly related to the acid content in the wine, and any potential microbiological activity that could potentially spring up. That higher acid is going to be kind of a fail-safe for those wines to continue to age really, really nicely. So definitely the acidity is crucial in the ability of these vignoles to age. Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vignole, to add, not to answer the question, which was an excellent question, but the Vignole grape I didn't mention was a grape developed in France around 1930 by a fellow by the name of Ravat. It used to be called Ravat 51. And according to the scientific literature, it has a lot of Pinot Noir in it, but it doesn't look or taste like a Pinot Noir. But so the scientists are still debating what the content of the grape is. But it's as Ben, it's amazing because Ben is a convert like I am. And I guess converts tend to be more religious. They're more religious than the Pope. That's the old saying. And I think both of us are that way with Vignole. It's just so fantastic. And
True.
Ben has already made what, if any of you come up here, it's this pet nat from Vignole. I assume many of you are familiar with that grape.
That's it.
And it is delicious. It's not yet ready, but it's delicious.
So, following up on the aging process with the Vignole, do you guys have do you recommend how long it should age when it's at peak, I guess?
I would. One of the beauties, it's like Riesling, and I would say in Riesling, it depends on your own taste buds. But I love Riesling when it's a year and a half old. I also love Riesling when it's 5 years old, and I also love Riesling when it's 15 years old. So that's one of the beauties. It evolves. Vignole doesn't evolve as much, so it maintains a lot of its flavor profile. And if you like it initially, you're going to. I suspect you're going to like it more 10 years from now.
Great.
So it's a great aging wine.
All right. Let's go ahead and try the semi-dry Riesling. And Ben, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about this wine.
So the 2017 semi-dry Riesling, it's a great example of what we do for our semi-dry at Keuka Lake Vineyards. The style that we like to achieve is a nice balance between the sugar content and the acidic backbone in this wine. We don't like to go overly sweet. We like to allow the fruit flavors and aromas, because Riesling is a particularly aromatic grape varietal. We like to allow that to show through in the wine, and still be fresh and delicious at the same time. We don't want something to be too onctuous or too viscous or too sweet. And I think this wine really achieves that. You have a lot of nice fresh peach aromas. You're starting to get some petrol character and nice minerality. It's a great example of our semi-dry Riesling. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you made a really good point, Ben. I mean, I know it's got a little bit of residual sugar, so it's got to be called semi-dry, but you really, except a hint on the end, you really, I should say on the finish, you really don't get a lot of sweet. It's absolutely delicious, and I can see why it would go so well with food.
Yeah. What I always say about our semi-dry is we make that semi-dry so that if a couple or two people want to have one bottle of wine together, and one prefers it slightly drier and the other one's a little bit sweet, this is a beautiful compromise. It really, a dry wine drinker can enjoy it, whereas a sweet wine drinker can adjust to this.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Gary says that he thought it was really great with foie gras. So
I imagine it is.
Oh, wow. What a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Mel, changing the topic a little bit, about your harvest this year and how it was affected by COVID. Because I know in the past you've had a lot of people volunteer to come out with and help with harvest, and then you have a big harvest dinner, and it's been one of my dreams to actually get up there and help with harvest and be a part of that dinner. Oh, that's a great picture.
Yeah.
Were you able to have volunteers this year, or how did it work?
Leave that picture, please, for a second, because the guy bending in the front with a purple shirt on that's bending, and he's a character, and his name is Jeff Nucciaroni, and he lives in State College, PA, and that's his son, I believe. And then right across from him is our chef, who comes from DC, Chris Garlock, and he cooks our meal. We do this. We've done this once a year, except for this COVID year, where volunteers come up and join us. We spend now. We figured out about more than 5 hours. People get too tired, so they do 5 hours of picking, and we have a grandiose meal, which I call pure vegetarian. It is it's recycled grapes. If some of you may catch what I'm driving at, it's venison that's eaten our grapes. And Chris Garlock will prepare that over 24 hours. So it really, with lots of local vegetables, we'll get all sorts of, some of the most delicious carrots that I've ever had, and some potatoes, and some turnips, and all kinds of. This is an excellent organic vegetable growing area in our region, and so we'll have a fantastic meal, and we'll bring out many of our library wines, older wines, and we'll even bring out some other wines during that fest. And we have this. Hopefully, next year we'll be able to do it again. Ben was really disappointed that we weren't going to. We toyed with the idea of having 6 or 8 people distanced and just doing it on a very small scale. But it just was not possible this year. Everybody has to be careful. But the harvest, to answer the earlier part of your question, the harvest was fabulous this year. It was small, unfortunately, but it was, in a sense, the vintage of the decade. We are going to have wines, and the price is going to go up. I'm sorry, Alan. I mean, we had so little, but it's so good that, you know, we can't afford not to raise the price from this year. But anyway.
Well, I mean, I'm glad it's going to be a great year. And you know what? Your wines are always worth the price. So whatever the price is, I'm sure it'll be very reasonable for the quality that you guys put out, which is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
There was a question about what kind of food would you recommend with the semi-dry Riesling? If either of you want to take that on.
Ben, you want to?
I think there's so many things you could pair with this. I mean, this is a great Thanksgiving wine as well. I mean, it's going to pair well with turkey and, you know, cranberry relish, or I think a lot of, you know, some roasted pork chops, with, you know, an apple chutney. I think there's a lot of great versatile dishes with fish as well. Seafood, Thai food, spicy food.
Yeah, spicy food, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, because that sugar is really going to kind of temper any of the heat. So, I mean, if you want to go to a Thai restaurant and get Thai hot, this would be the wine to bring with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I see Christy wants everybody from DMV to come up and help you with harvest. What's the maximum number of people you allow up there for your harvest?
Well, in the past, pre-DMV, roughly 25, 30 is what we can manage. But you know, I think we have a system. I mean, Ben has been very helpful in terms of helping us think through during COVID. What we've done in terms of tasting here during COVID is we were fortunate to have a very warm summer with lots of sun and very little rain. So we had most of the tastings almost all the tastings outside. And what we did on rainy days was we used our 200-year-old barn with high ceilings and lots of ventilation because it has holes in it, in the walls. It's a fantastic building. And Ben has helped fix that place up tremendously. And I think we can accommodate a lot more people for the meal during harvest. And possibly we could expand it up to 35, 40. But I mean, we'll give preference.
Ambitious, Mel. You're ambitious. I like that.
Now, is it a one-day harvest?
Yeah, it's a one-day harvest.
Okay. And which brings up another question. I think I know the answer, but I'll ask anyway, just so everyone else knows. Are there any of your vines that you don't handpick?
No. We don't. We handpick all of our own. A little bit that we buy. Yes, a little bit that we buy. For example, in the vignole that you're tasting, was machine harvested. That was machine harvested, but all of ours is hand harvested. All of our vignole now is hand harvested. Now that's Pinot Noir and Cabernet Franc. And this year, Ben is making a potentially luscious Pinot Noir, finally, that we haven't been able to produce. Most of our Pinot Noir has gone into our red blend. But this year, we expect to have a luscious Pinot Noir. And then below that is Cabernet Franc, and this is very close to the lake. And if you look at that lake, it looks like a river to you folks, but that's actually a lake. And it's 170 feet deep. So during most winters, it doesn't freeze. It's only frozen once in the last 25 years since we've been here. So, and that was in 2014-15, the 15 winter. It froze January to early April. And that was a year, and when it freezes and the temperatures get very low, and this is probably a good time to talk about how to farm in the Finger Lakes and what we have to do. In the wintertime, we have to do a lot of extra work helping the vines last the winter in case we get temperatures of below -6 or -8 degrees. If you get those kinds of temperatures, Riesling and Cabernet Franc grapes are not happy, and we can lose a lot of buds. And if it gets too cold, as it did in certain regions, not in ours, in Seneca Lake in 2003 and 2004, you can lose entire vines. In order to avoid that, what we do, and I don't know if Jess is going to show that movie, a video of what we hill up. We do two things. We do two things particularly. One is we place dirt above the vines, and then we grow multiple trunks. Unlike most wine regions where you have one trunk that gets thicker and thicker, what we try to do is grow multiple trunks so that we ensure that if a trunk suffers from the cold or gets a bacteria as a result of splitting, we have a second and a third trunk to grow up. And I think if that video comes through, you'll be able to see both the hilling up process as well as the fact that we have multiple trunks.
All right, let's see if that video happens or not. Oh, no, it is not going to happen, I'm told. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, too.
Apparently Jess did not receive the video somehow. So we do not have the video. But we do have more questions. And Christy wants to know, how many bottles a year are you guys producing there? I know it's not a lot.
It's not a lot. Our maximum production one year was about 3,400 cases. We have been the last 2 or 3 years a little below 3,000 cases. We hope to get back up. We're working hard in the vineyard to make sure that we can, and we need to sell more too at the same time. But 3,000 and gradually over the next 2 or 3 years to 5,000. That's where we expect to get.
Mel, I have a friend, Marty Knott, who lives up in Rochester, and he's asking if you are still welcoming visitors to the winery by appointment.
Yes, we are. We have a reservation system that he can make, or he can call Marty. You can call the tasting room and leave a message in case somebody doesn't answer, and we'll get back to you. But the easiest way is to link from our website to the reservation system.
And I think you might have covered this a little bit, but if you want to go back to how you're protecting the grapes from the frost, the vines, I should say, from the frost.
What we do protecting the vines, I mean, there are various systems, but we use two systems, and these are the general ones used in the Finger Lakes. One is every fall at this time, right now we're doing it, is you're running your tractor next to the vines, and you're taking soil and placing it above the graft, a couple of inches above the graft. As everybody probably knows, your Riesling and your Cabernet Franc grapes are grafted, like this, onto American rootstock. And so what you want to do is protect with the Riesling and the Cabernet are called the scion. You want to protect the scion so that even if you have lots and lots of cold and buds die, you want the scion to still live. The rootstock is very strong, so it won't die. It's American rootstock, and it can withstand, 20, 30 degrees below zero temperatures. So that's one thing. The second thing, as I said, is we bring up multiple trunks from the rootstock. So we don't just have one trunk going up and canes coming off and trellised on both sides. We have 2 trunks or 3 trunks where possible, so that in case a trunk gets damaged or winter, we have a second and a third trunk to keep life.
How about any delayed pruning, Mel?
Pardon?
The hybrids versus the Vitis vinifera in different times throughout the winter.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Thank you, Ben. What we're right now, we're already, since the leaves have all fallen off, our superb pruner, a Hawaiian who married a Hammondsport gal who's been pruning here, been working in vineyards for the last 25 years. He's our chief pruner. And he started on our hybrid grapes. So he's working on the Vignoles right now. And he worked on something called the Léon Millot, which was brought here by Charles Fournier, a winemaker from Champagne region who came here after Prohibition and was the real pioneer of vinifera and hybrid grapes here in the Finger Lakes. And he planted an experimental plot that we manage right now in about 1950. And so we have these grapes called Léon Millot, which are these deep purple grapes that were developed in Alsace around a little after 1900. And they make a wonderful, a very interesting grape. But we can prune those. They're very cold hardy. The Léon Millot and the Vignoles, we prune them now before the coldest part of winter in January and February. We don't touch the Riesling or the Cabernet Franc or the Pinot Noir until late February and March. And you should be aware, I know it's very different than the DC area where you have, cherry blossoms in late March. We don't have bud break here with our grapes until generally the first or second week of May. So you won't find leaves out on trees here until May. Maybe late April sometimes.
That's really interesting. And I'm going to continue asking questions. This may be a record for questions we've received on Virtual Vino. People are really curious. So I'm going to keep asking these questions. The next one was, does a colder winter produce a sweeter grape, or does it only affect the yield of grapes produced?
Okay, there's various kinds of winters. Various kinds of cold. So if we just have a standard, cold here isn't like cold in Maryland or DC. Cold here means, minus Fahrenheit, negative temperatures. So, but if we get a standard cold winter where we have lots of, 0 degrees and 5 above, and it doesn't affect very much. It's fine. The grapes are dormant and they are cold hardy till usually about minus 10 degrees. So if it doesn't get to that kind of temperature and we have normal, slow getting colder and colder, you don't have any. We had a Christmas massacre here before I lived here in 1980 or 1981. I can't remember. And it was a famous Christmas massacre where the temperature fell on Christmas Day by 60 degrees in one day, and that greatly affected the grapes. So it actually killed the grapes. Many vinifera grapes. But if it gets colder, it doesn't affect the sweetness. The sweetness is determined really more or less by the number of degree days over the growing season. So as long as the cold doesn't affect it, but the warmth affects it. So as long as we don't get a frost in late September, then Riesling grapes can go on and ripen. We've even had one year where we harvested our last Riesling grapes, our famous Falling Man Vineyard, on November 2nd. And in fact, that's my favorite vintage. It was a cool vintage, but an endless fall. That's the Falling Man Vineyard. And it's quite steep. And it's called Falling Man because tractors have slid and people fall. And it's only a little bit above an acre. But it makes a wine, a single vineyard Riesling that we're very famous for, and that people come from miles to buy. And that's one that goes, for example, it went into the new 2017 Falling Man, which was, and that Falling Man vineyard has been rated a bunch of times, 92 and even 93, by the Wine Spectator, the Wine Advocate, and the 17 went in our wine club pack this time. We have 2 clubs, wine clubs. I'm sorry to be advertising wine clubs. Is that okay with you, Alan? If I mention?
Go right ahead. I think it's great.
We have 2 wine clubs, and one of them is a Riesling only club. So it's for lovers of Riesling. And since we make a whole bunch of single vineyard, like the Upper East Side that you offer in Maryland and in DC, we make a Falling Man vineyard many years, an Evergreen Lek vineyard many years, a 20 Rose vineyard in many years, and then we make a dry and a semi-dry Riesling, and then we have library wines. And so wine club members for Riesling only club get different Rieslings from going back and get access to our library as well. We also have a red and white club, which features our Cabernet Franc and our Léon Millot, as well as our white wines. So anyway, sorry, but I don't know how I got onto that, but I apologize. Is there another question?
There are a lot of questions. I'm having trouble keeping track of all of them. And I did want to give you an update on the video. So Jess says that the video is going to be on our Instagram and Facebook page when this is over. So if people want to check out that video, they are more than welcome to go to the DMV Instagram or DMV Facebook page to see it. So there's so many questions. One of the questions is, are you able to make ice wine in the Finger Lakes? I don't remember if you guys make any or not. Do others make ice wine up there?
We have never made ice wine. There are a couple of places that make ice wine. We have made something called Trockenbeeren Auslese. I'm not a good German student. My wife speaks German, but I don't. And TBA is a very select late harvest Riesling, and the one time that we made it in 2011, it was glorious. We have about 7 bottles left. We couldn't make too many. You lose so many grapes and so much weight that, given our size, and it's very difficult to make. But the ice wine, there are a couple of wineries that make some nice ice wine. But there are a couple of others that make some very nice Trockenbeeren Auslese or late harvest Rieslings.
Some say we should go ahead and pour the Cabernet Franc. And while pouring this wine, I'm going to ask you another question that I see up here. And now I lost. Oh, yeah. So someone wants to know, how do they get into? Gene wants to know, how do they get into your wine club?
You can. It's very easy. You can go online and join the wine club right there, and we will send you out the first packet. This is the month of wine club month, so we just sent this week we sent out the wine packets for Thanksgiving, and we can send it out so that it'll arrive. And we could try to send it out on Monday, but it's more likely to be useful for you for Christmas. But you can go online, or you can call the winery and we can arrange it by phone.
Okay. So we're tasting your now famous Cabernet Franc that the New York Times was so kind as to say that it was one of only 2 red wines that they would recommend with Thanksgiving dinner. And it's obvious why. I guess if Ben wants to talk a little bit about Cabernet Franc, and I know a lot of people aren't that familiar with Cabernet Franc. Some people possibly confuse it with Cabernet Sauvignon, which is obviously a totally different varietal. But Ben, if you want to go into some detail about Cabernet Franc and why it grows so well in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, I would love to. So Yeah, my experience personally with Cabernet Franc has been in Bordeaux and some visits up into the Loire Valley in France. There's an amazing wine that's made from Cabernet Franc. It's called Chinon and Sommer-Champagny. And I feel like those wines are very similar in flavor profile to the wines and style of the Cabernet Franc from Finger Lakes. And it is a different grape varietal from Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a hybrid between Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. So it is like one part of that grape varietal. And they're very similar in some flavor profile characteristics, but these wines from Finger Lakes, they show, and particularly this wine, which I felt was a great example of the quality and the potential of Cab Franc in the Finger Lakes, is that there's a lot of ripe qualities. So there's a lot of like ripe sweet plum, but there's also some delicious freshness, some tart red fruit, like Bing cherries and pomegranates, a really nice balance between some ripe and mature fruit characteristics and some nice fresh tart acidic qualities as well. Not overly extracted, a nice tannin structure. So these wines, again, the gentleman that asked about acidity, this is a wine that will age quite nicely because it has a nice acidic backbone and a nice tannin structure. And it's beautifully aromatic. There's a really nice floral component, some nice fresh violets as well when you smell this wine. And you even kind of get some site-specific characters, a little bit of cigar and graphite characteristics that are really nice coming through on this wine. So when this wine got rated as recommended for a perfect Thanksgiving wine, it's definitely merited that note for sure. Yeah, great example of Cabernet Franc from the Finger Lakes.
Yeah. And just to add briefly, Alan, to what Ben had to say on it, this wine, as soon as it was rated by the New York Times in the way it was, all of a sudden we only had a little over a pallet left, and it just went out the door. And you should just know that the only place that I know of that still has this vintage available is in Maryland and DC.
I don't think that's going to last much longer after tonight. So I'm sure by the end of Thanksgiving, our Cabernet Franc will be gone and we'll be on to the next vintage, which I'm sure is equally as fabulous.
It's very good. It's different, but it's very good. Yeah. I mean, but this is still one of, to be frank, one of my favorite vintages that we've had of Cab Franc.
So I have another question. Actually, I think Ben pretty much covered the difference, explained Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon very well. So I want to address that question, but I will ask you, has climate change, Jess wants to know, has climate change affected, I lost the question. There it is. Affected the wines in the Finger Lakes at all?
I guess I'll take that on. This is something that we've been asked a number of times, and my experience, and particularly in talking to people who grew grapes back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, is that climate change has given a much longer, on average, growing season, and so you are able to ripen the grapes more. The average time for fall frosts to occurs later and later, so that if you have a cooler summer, you still have time to ripen the grapes in the fall. If you don't have a severe frost that freezes the leaves out. So and that warmth allows the grapes. I think the Cabernet Franc. My guess is, I wasn't around then. My guess is that this kind of Cabernet Franc wouldn't have been possible in the 1960s or the 1970s, but that it is possible today. Now farmers are supposed to be pessimistic and always look at things from the negative side, even though they have to be optimistic to be farmers. But there are those people that believe that the extreme weather conditions that we will get will play havoc with some of the grapes. And we do see this to a certain extent, that we had, for example, we had some drought years, like this year in 2016, were very dry years. And we were getting worried about drought stress. Finally, we didn't have it, but there were severe droughts. And then you get other years like 2018 where you have excessive rain. So you are going to have these years. You are going to have variations where you get more droughts and more rain. But I think on average we're lucky, and we'll just deal with that excess periodically. But we'll at least be able to have very lovely, ripe grapes in most years. And Riesling seems to do well. We've only had 1 year with some issues of not getting a good ripe Riesling grape in the 20 years that we've been growing Riesling.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I gotta stop drinking this Cabernet Franc. It's absolutely unbelievable, Mel. And
isn't it?
And I could see. I mean, I didn't ask because it's probably pretty obvious to anybody that's tasting it. But I guess I should ask Mel. What specifically you think it might pair well with in a Thanksgiving dinner? Off the top of my head, I would say just about everything, because I could see how. I'm going to steal your thunder. I apologize, but I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking about Thanksgiving dinner and cranberry and yams and turkey, and I mean, I can't think of a different. And if you're going to have a red wine, I can't think of any other red wine I'd prefer over this wine for Thanksgiving dinner.
I would agree. Maybe Ben, what would you say since you've been he tasted this for the first time last night, and he texted me. He said, "This is fantastic." He said he didn't realize. He said, "This is really a good wine." Go ahead.
As far as what other wines I would
what it would pair best with a Thanksgiving dinner.
I mean, it's as you said, Alan, it's gonna go well with everything that's on the table. Yeah, I mean, it should go with everything that you have. Yeah, the turkey, the yams, the cranberry relish. I mean, everything that you've got going on your dinner, it should just go very, very well. And it's a great wine by itself. It's like an aperitif wine, or at the end of dinner, it can be a digestif wine. Like it has so much versatility. Yeah, it's very, very nice. Yeah.
All right. I think we covered all the questions and we covered the 4 wines, and they're absolutely amazing. I want to remind people that Mel and Ben make many, many other wines, and you can go to their website, which I know Jess had up earlier. I think it's still up there actually, and order wines directly from them. And I highly recommend you do that for the wines that DMV doesn't carry, of course.
Yes.
And
right.
And enjoy the wines, because they really, really are wonderful. And I thank you guys so much. I mean, this has been a really informative evening. I hope everyone watching it tonight enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you can't find KLV wines in your local wine shop, please don't hesitate to ask the store in Maryland or DC to contact DMV. And of course, we would be happy to sell them the wines so that you are able to purchase the wines at your local store. Hopefully, we talked about visiting up there, and hopefully with COVID being gone some point next year, people will be able to go visit Mel and Ben at KLV in the near future. And you're going to find that it's not just the wines we tasted tonight, but they've got a whole lot more wonderful wines, and it's absolutely beautiful there. I was there for my, I'm sure Mel remembers, I was up there for my 10-year anniversary. My wife and I went to the Finger Lakes, and Mel spoiled us. And we were able to walk through the vineyards, and Mel was so wonderful. And it was really neat tasting. We picked different grapes off the vine and tasted what different varietals tasted like before the winemaking process had even begun. And not a lot of people have done that. And I thought it was really cool. And I still think about that, Mel, and I really, really appreciate what you did for us. So I can't thank you guys enough for being on tonight. This was a lot of fun. And like I said before, really informative. And Mel, please give my best to Dorothy. I feel like I haven't seen her forever, and I hope she's doing well.
And give my best to Gail. Thank you.
So you guys have a really safe holiday season, and hopefully we're going to get to see you in person next year. Looking forward to trying the new vintage Cabernet Franc, because I'm quite certain this is going to go in the next day or two. So thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and thank all of you that participated. Take care.
So our next virtual Vino will be on a special date. We're gonna do it Wednesday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. and we're gonna be tasting what we're calling it a holiday tasting, because it's appropriate for certain holidays. And it'll be at 7 p.m. on December 2nd. We're gonna taste the Lion and Dove Sauvignon Blanc, Rosé, Pinot Noir, and Carmenere. If you're interested in picking up the 4 wines, along with a virtual Vino wine bag, which I'm displaying what you can't see, and also the wine bag should contain our tasting sheets as well. So it's a lot of fun, and we've got a lot of stores that are carrying the Lion and Dove wines for you. So go ahead and pick them up if you're interested. And if you can't find the wines, of course, contact us, and we'll certainly help you find the wines. We do have a specific website for Lion and Dove wines that has a map that shows where you can find the wines as well. If you live outside Maryland and DC, you can contact Paul's Wine and Spirits in DC, and they ship to most states and would be happy to mail you the wines. So thanks again to everyone for joining us, and a special thanks to Jess, who does all the important work behind the scenes on this broadcast, and hopefully everyone appreciates everything she does. And I really hope to see everyone again on December 2nd. Thank you so much. Thanks again to Mel and to Ben.